since their sixth grade year. Friday evening, I was an honored guest at their eighth grade graduation. Being in the presence of greatness that evening was surely the high point of my week. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Warren.
Go, Joe.
And now I believe we have a song from
We do.
Joel.
So for those of you, hi, I'm Joel. For those of you that are visitors, we actually sing every Tuesday morning. So loosen up the vocal cords. And I'll put my glasses on so I can actually see what we're singing, although everyone knows the song. Anyone that looking around, almost everybody was alive in the 60s. A couple of exceptions, but here we go. So a little Beatles. I chose this one. I was looking, it's the year of the rat. I was looking for rat songs. There weren't any good ones. Well, they were good, just not appropriate. And this one seemed like the right way to start off a brand new year. So happy new year to everyone. Hopefully it plays. There we go. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Sorry, it's been a long, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Darling, the smile's returning to the face. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here comes. 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 Sun, sun, here comes. Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. It's all right.
It comes to rain today.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I believe the forecast
It's gonna snow later in the week. Here comes the snow.
Yeah. So I'd like to welcome our Sergeant at Arms for today, Mr. Howard Cohen. Howard. Good morning.
So first, non-Rotarian guests. Do we have any? Yes, Sherry.
We have Robin Shapiro, who's our speaker, and she also brought Cheryl Ferguson. Cheryl, do you want to stand up and say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cheryl Ferguson. I'm a career coach and a recruiting consultant, but I know of this group because Marita, your best ambassador ever, has told me about this group. Thank you for
Welcome.
We have a visiting Rotarian, Chris Hoffler. Can you stand up and introduce yourself and tell us about you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Leffler. I've been a Rotarian for 7 years now. I worked in Bellevue for a long time, and I joined the Bellevue Club 7 years ago after Warren Crane and others invited me to participate in a group study exchange through Rotary to Nepal in 2011. So I drank the Kool-Aid and I've joined and been a member ever since.
I was going to come back and buy Kool-Aid for you. Do we, now that we're into a new year, we've all said Happy New Year. Let's have some happy bucks. Who would like to start off with some happy bucks? Anybody? Bill?
I've got 5 happy bucks. I'm happy to report that on Christmas Day, the drinking water treatment system for the Knoxville School in Thailand was installed, and now 1,000 kids per day will have access to safe drinking water, thanks in part to this club. So.
Anybody else for happy bucks? Joel?
Oh, I've got 5 happy bucks. So I left Bank of America officially resigned on November 1st, was officially freed on December 31st, and then started our new business yesterday, January 6th, with our own practice over in Bellevue called Sound Legacy Wealth Advisors. So.
Perfect.
And I may become calling and after this back.
Yeah.
Congratulations into your next phase.
Thank you.
Anybody else happy bucks? Okay. So who was here on who was around on January 7th, 1927? Anybody? Phil, you look great for that. So on January 7th, 1927, the first transatlantic telephone service was made to the public. And because of this day, we have some quizzes on that, since we all now use cell phones, which is the phone, which is from the old phone. So between the two cities, what was the first official 2 cities to do a transatlantic phone call? Arlington, Virginia, and Paris, France. A. B. New York and London. C. Boston and Berlin. D. Connecticut and Brussels. So if you're not a member, you don't have to participate on the fine side, but it's $1 per wrong question, $2 max, and that's all. So we'll come back to that one in a second. 2, the telephone company was founded in 1877, was known as the Bell Telephone Company, named after its inventor, Alexander Graham Bell. What modern-day telecommunications company originated from the Bell Company? A. Charter Communications, B. Sprint, C. AT&T, and D. United Telecommunications Company. Should be pretty easy. Third question is, last, the Bell Telephone Company became the American Telephone. I'm trying to give away that answer. Wait, I was reading the answer. Sorry. Question number 3. Sorry, it's an answer. In 1882, American inventor Alman Brown Strowger was granted a patent for this telecommunications invention that changed the way phone calls were made. Although this is not the invention that is common today, parts of its namesake is. What invention was this?
What year?
1892. He invented something that was patented, that became useful, which is no longer useful today, but the word or concept is still around today. And what is that word? So we're going to go back to question number 1. What were the 2 cities that the first transatlantic call was in between? A. Arlington and Paris. B. New York and London. C, Boston and Berlin, D, Connecticut and Brussels. Which one?
B.
B, New York and London, yes. So if you got that right, great. If not, throw a dollar in. 2, I kind of gave away the answer. I was reading the answer instead of the third question. Yes, it was AT&T. It wasn't Sprint, though I'm sure they tried to sprint around there. Number 3, anybody have the answer to that one? Yes.
It's the Rotary, so that word dial.
Rotary phone, which is Rotary. So David's our quiz master. So David, do you want to give a little history behind this, how the Rotary phone came to be?
Sure. So I'm sure most of you guys know, at least more than I do, that before you were able to direct dial, you had to pick up the phone and speak to a telephone operator, and they would connect you to whoever you were trying to call. So this inventor had an undertaking business, and his competitor's wife was a telephone operator. And anyone called and asked for him, he would transfer the calls to her husband rather than him. So his motivation behind it was to find a way to automatically dial the person directly in the rotary dial part of that process.
And that is our quiz, yes?
So I was cruising around Facebook and found a video of 2, I'm going to say 17 to 20-year-old boys. Their parents in the video setup, they've got a rotary phone sitting there, and they put a box over it, and their parents said, take the box off, and then we have a quiz for you. So it's the 2 boys sitting there. They pull the box off, and they hand them a piece of paper and said, dial this telephone number. And it's a rotary phone. And they said, you have 4 minutes to dial this number. And they couldn't do it. They had no idea. They didn't know that they had to pick the phone up to get dial tone. They didn't know that you had to go all the way around. It's a hilarious video. So yeah, that's why I was actually thinking of the rotary.
Well, if anybody's interested, I started working in the hotel industry, actually, truly started working over 50 years ago at a hotel where I grew up. And we had a switchboard, you know the old Lily Tomlin switchboard with the cords and the rotary dial. Later worked at a hospital that had the same thing. So a friend of mine got me a gift. I actually have one of those switchboards in my office. So if anybody's ever interested and wants to sit down and play with cords and dial a phone and put a headphone on, let me know and I'll show you my switchboard in my office. Anyways, at that note, thank you very much. And we're back to President Mark.
All right. Thank you very much, Howard. Joel, was that video on YouTube, the rotary phone video?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I think I posted it, but it's pretty, I mean, literally, you were cracking up at these 2 boys. And they're talking to each other, like strategizing. No, wait, do you do this? Is that a 0? Is that a 9?
Yeah, I've got a 14-year-old, so I want to show him that video. Sounds entertaining. All right, well, thank you very much, Howard. We've got time for some announcements. The first announcement I'd like to make is regarding Christine Go. So the club formally acknowledged her as a member, and we've got some, as I just disappear behind the podium, we've got some materials for Christine. We're going to do Christine's induction next week because our induction master, Tom, will be here. But I did want to recognize Christine, ask her to come up here, and we can give her some of the Emerald City swag. All right. So the important thing is your official name tag, and then your plaque. This is a cool plaque that I've got one from a long time ago. So I've got this in my office, and some materials for you to read and memorize. Everything you need to know about Rotary, and we've got a limited edition Rotary cup mug, so that you can drink your drinks and they won't get they won't cool down, or they'll stay cold or something like that. So these are for you, and welcome to the club, and we'll do your induction next week. So be here next week. All right. Thank you very much. All right. That's always always great to start off with a new member in the club and other announcements. So I don't know if you're aware, but there is a passport club that meets in this hotel, and I don't know if they meet here every month or, okay, so this is kind of like their home base. But a Passport Rotary Club is a club that you can join, and you can participate in other clubs. So it's sort of like you have a passport, you can go to different clubs. But this is called the Puget Sound Passport Rotary Club, and they will be here next Monday at 6 p.m. And they sent me a note saying that their guest speaker is General Barry McCaffrey, and he's going to speak about the situation in Iran and Iraq. So very topical speaker, and I think it would be an interesting one to participate in, especially if you have to do a makeup and you've missed some meetings. You can use that as your makeup, and it's right here. So next Monday at 6 p.m., and I'll send out more information about that if you ever want to check that out. Other announcements. Do we have any other announcements for the good of the club?
So the international committee
Yes.
for funding the various international projects and plus supports will meet 2 weeks from today on 21st, right after.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. So Phil is the chair of the international committee that meets to look at the different projects that we can help fund, the international projects that we can help fund. So that's a really important opportunity for us to give back to the international community. I believe Howard has some.
So on your agenda here, you'll notice that on February 4th, which is Tuesday, there's no meeting in the morning, and we'll be meeting for our social event that Matt has strategically done and been totally wonderful at. It's going to be over at Solo. Solo is the middle bar that we went to the polio project day. Yeah. And so it's a really fun, nice, comfortable environment. I'll be going by there this week to let them know. I'm sure they'll be glad to have business. And it's right up the street. It's 1 block north of Mercer, just going west. It's on the right-hand side. We were there before. Really cool. So bring friends. From Matt, maybe we have some more things he wants to say about it.
Sure, no, thanks very much. Yeah, this will be our third happy hour, and they've been good events, so let's get good attendance. Yeah, and like Howard said, Solo, when we went on the pub crawl, we went to 3 pubs, and Solo was everybody's favorite. And so it's a nice space, and so it's really close to here. And hopefully everybody can be there for the first Tuesday meeting. And this is an official meeting of the club. It's just in the happy hour time slot instead of the morning time slot. Any other announcements for the club? Howard.
The district conference is coming up.
Yes.
On April 3rd and 4th. It is in Seattle, the first time in 20 years. It's a Friday night event, and then Saturday there is going to be this food assembly line that's going to be putting together these bags of food that will be shipped off to third world countries. District Governor Bill McElroy is trying to get a world record set, and is having people supposedly there from the Guinness Book of Records. And we would love to have as many people there to help do that. They can have students coming, Rotaracts, other students interact, as well as Rotarians. That's a really great thing to do. It is available online. If you see the peacethroughaction.com is the website to go to. And then if anybody is interested, I know everybody likes Hawaii. Hawaii is the site of the latest Rotary International Conference in June, and also a wonderful experience. Because it's in the U.S. and because it's in Hawaii, there'll probably be close to 40,000 people there, but it's an event of a lifetime. When you go through the House of Friendship, you get to see all these booths, all these projects, and overwhelming.
Thank you, Howard. So with the raise of hands, how many people are already registered to go to the
the district conference here in Seattle. Everybody's registered to go. Great. And who's registered to go to the international conference in Hawaii? All right. All right. Well, I think there's still time to register for both of those. Like Howard said, I would encourage everybody to participate in those, especially since the international conference is a relatively short hop internationally for Seattle people because it's in Hawaii, whereas last year it was in Germany. So it's sort of close to where we are. So I believe we are ready for our main speaker, and I think that Sherry's going to do the introduction. So please help me welcome Sherry.
I'm so happy to introduce Robin Shapiro. She is a health communications entrepreneur with more than 30 years experience. She's founded several award-winning companies that engage patients in sharing their personal medical story to help others, including Health Advocacy Strategies and Health Perspective Group. Seattle Business Magazine recognized her as a woman to watch. She was a 2012 finalist in the Washington Women's Business Organization's WBO, Nellie Cashman's Business Owner of the Year. Robin was selected as a 40 under 40 honoree by the Puget Sound Business Journal. She currently serves on the Seattle University Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center Board and the International Women's Forum Board. Got it? She is currently board chair and co-founder of the Washington State Health Advocacy Association and is a nationally recognized pioneer in the health advocacy movement. She can now add the title of author to her list of achievements. Her book, The Secret Language of Healthcare: How to Ask for the Care You Deserve, debuted as the #1 new release in multiple Amazon categories, including healthcare delivery. Please help me welcome Robin Shapiro.
I can honestly say that I have never started a meeting with a song like that. It's such a fun way to start the morning. So thank you all, and I really appreciate being here this morning, especially at the start of the year, because I love the start of things, which is kind of related to my book and the journey in writing my book, because health advocacy is really at the beginning of its movement. And so today what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about my career and what led to me writing this book, what it's about, and then I thought I'd share some stories from the book, because who in this room has not had a healthcare story that has been challenging? I haven't seen any hands go up, one maybe, but so I'd like to say that I was delighted that my book, The Secret Language of Healthcare: How to Ask for the Care You Deserve, debuted in newly released best-selling categories. And I think that it debuted as a bestseller because we're all trying to understand how to navigate healthcare better. So just like other movements that we have seen most recently gain traction, health advocacy is really designed to put health choice and control in the hands of patients where we haven't had it before, because let's face it, nobody tells us how to navigate healthcare, and we very often are only finding out about how to navigate healthcare when we or a loved one or a neighbor, somebody we know, is navigating something challenging. So before I go into the book, I'd like to share some highlights from my 30-plus career. And I was just talking to somebody at the beginning of the morning this morning. I'm originally from Missouri, which I call it a great place to be from. So I haven't lived there in a very, very long time, but the start of my career was really in college, where I got degrees in journalism and political science, because I've always been really curious about issues, and I had a focus on healthcare even back then. And I was very, very lucky because I ended up going from there to Washington, D.C., where I worked for Ogilvy and Mather, which is a very well-known public affairs firm. And there I was really blessed to be able to work on the federal government's America Response to AIDS campaign. So in 1987, a little while ago, HIV and AIDS was the #1 concern of Americans. And the federal government responded in kind of an extraordinary way for the time, which was in 1988, they launched the America Response to AIDS campaign. And at that time, my first work assignment, way back then, was to help to contribute to write Surgeon General C. Everett Koop's letter to every household in America about AIDS. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was a time of fear because people knew that people were dying and they just didn't know why. They didn't know anything about the disease. And that really started my career of trying to look at and understand what motivates people to make change, especially in their healthcare decisions. So I went from Washington, D.C. to working on another kind of high visibility program, the spotted owl issue in the, does anybody remember that, out in the Northwest, right, in the early 1990s. And it brought me out to the Northwest where I had never been before. And I have to say that I fell in love with this place and was able to do advanced work on President Clinton's Forest Summit and in 1993. And that eventually brought me out to here. I said, really want to live in the Northwest. And what do you know? A friend of mine the very next week said, hey, there's this job in Seattle, Washington, where I'd never been before, at a company called Immunex. I don't know if anybody remembers Immunex. It's a biotechnology company back in the time where I said, what's biotechnology? Right? Because that was a time when that was not very well known. So it was a great company and a really cool job because I got to work in part with patients. I was the director of communications and started their public affairs department. But there was one patient there who really was an inflection point in my career. And her name was Carrie Walter from Spokane, Washington. She was a young woman and she called me before Immunex's flagship product to treat rheumatoid arthritis had been approved. And she had called because she explained to me that when she was young, a teenager, she had participated in every kind of sport imaginable. You know, that kind of kid that's just really just a great athlete and always on the move. And rheumatoid arthritis, while it typically strikes people in mid-age, actually struck her. And I don't know if you know what rheumatoid arthritis is, but it's a really devastating disease that affects the joints and makes your joints really unusable. So she explained to me that she had to quit all of her sports and had a very, very difficult time moving around. But she went on, she got married, she had a baby, and thankfully, when she was pregnant, the rheumatoid arthritis went into remission. But after the baby was born, the rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory autoimmune disease, came back and raged. She couldn't use her hands. In fact, she told me that she diapered her child with her teeth, if you can imagine that. And I couldn't imagine that. But she was calling to tell me that even though she had gotten to the point where she did not know if she wanted to continue to live in the way that she was, because she was in so much pain and she couldn't care for her child, Immunex had changed that with the product that they had developed. And it had given her her life back. She could use her hands, she could hold her baby, she wasn't tired all the time. And she said, if I could just help one person with my story, knowing that there are so many people suffering out there, I want to do it. What can I do? Not only to thank the scientists at Immunex, but also to connect with other patients who might be in that very, very dark place that I once was. And so, being the PR person that I am and was, I said, I don't know how to share your story or what method, but I'll tell you this, I'm going to figure out a way. And I started a program at Immunex that actually would be the seed of my first company, Health Advocacy Strategies. And the company really was focused on helping people share their stories to give hope and inspiration to other patients who were navigating extreme medical conditions. So I went on to found Health Advocacy Strategies in 2002, actually, after I left Immunex. And the way that that came about was kind of interesting because Amgen, maybe you know that company, bought Immunex. And I was in the communications department and thinking, wow, this is going to be a really big change for me. What am I going to do next? And I had this overwhelming feeling that whatever it was going to be great. And I just kept on saying that. And I hired a friend of mine to actually explore what I was going to do. And so much like you, Joel, in kind of taking this leap, which I love to hear those stories, I thought about what I love to do most. And I thought about Carrie, and I thought about the hundreds of patients who had stories like that. And I wondered if the same program that I had built at Immunex would actually work at other companies. And so that's how I came to found Health Advocacy Strategies in 2002. And on the first day of founding this company, I had one office space and one staff person, and my husband, who was a stay-at-home dad for my whole career and was staying at home with our 2-year-old and 4-year-old baby, called me up and said, "Do you think you should get an MBA?" And I think he was worried. And I said, "Honey, this is going to be my MBA." And I'm very happy to say that on the second day of business, a former colleague called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you're doing a business around that program that you started. I'd like to make a referral." And so that's how that company got started. And today, that company is actually a family of companies, and there are over 100 employees. It's still based here in Seattle, Washington, and we've really done a lot of cool things with thousands and thousands of patients, providing inspiration, still doing similar things. So anyway, about 5 years later, I can't explain it, but I had this overwhelming feeling that I was supposed to be starting another company. Kind of an odd feeling, but I tend to listen to those things. And I, in fact, met with a couple of my close friends, and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm starting another company." I said, "But I don't know what it is. I know it's in healthcare, but I don't know what it is." And everybody kind of laughed, like, "Why are you doing this?" And about 3 months later, I met my future business partner, Beth Proppert, who's a nurse, at an Arthritis Foundation event. And she said, you know, whatever she was doing at the time, she said, "But what I really want to do is that when I go with my family and friends to the doctor, to the hospital, they get different and better care. And I don't think that's fair. I think everybody should have access to someone like me or the information that I have, because I know the questions to ask and most people don't." And I looked at her and I said, "I have been looking for you. I'm going to help you start this company." So in 2008, we co-founded Allied Health Advocates. It was the first independent health advocate company here in Washington State. We had 8 nurses, 2 insurance advocates, and a physician's assistant. And we worked directly for patients and their families who would hire us for medically messy, typically, cases. And that was really, really cool. So that was in 2008. What we didn't expect was that no one knew what health advocacy was. So this was now 12 years ago, hard to believe. So we were really pioneering that. That was just when the movement was absolutely getting started. And so, one of the things that we decided was that people needed to understand what health advocacy was all about. And again, health advocacy is all about providing choice and control to patients in medical decision making. So we co-founded the Washington State Health Advocacy Association, WASHA. And in fact, I have some materials in the back of the room if you'd like to hear more about that. It is a not-for-profit here focused on increasing awareness of what health advocacy is, teaching skills. We give a variety of different workshops, and then connecting people to resources, health advocacy resources, not just cancer or one particular disease. And so through that, we've really been able to help thousands of people, which has been really, really wonderful. But one of the things that really struck me was I was at a National Association of Health Advocacy Consultants, a national meeting on health advocacy. And there I met a woman named Karen Curtis, who lives in Chicago, Illinois. And she talked about her personal story of multiple family members in and out of the hospital, one of them tragically leading to her dad's death in the hospital. And she gave a talk called Safe and Sound in the Hospital, a short course in patient safety. And when I heard her give that talk, one of the statistics absolutely stuck with me. And I was wondering if you might know this information as well, which is preventable medical errors in the hospital are the third leading cause of death in our country. So I'm going to step back and break that down for you so you can really understand that, because when I heard that, I said, whoa, wait, back up. So preventable medical errors in the hospital leading to death are the third leading cause of death behind heart disease and cancer in our country. Is that something that you all know? Did anybody know that statistic?
I have a friend who works in a hospital, and she just told me that.
Okay. So why don't we know that information? And not for the scare factor, but for the fact that if that is really the third leading cause of death, think of all the heart disease and cancer information out there. There's a whole load of events and education, but there's really not a lot of information about how we all collectively can get involved in lowering that rate. A lot of people are dying. That does not include non-preventable medical events. That does not include all the non-preventable medical events that don't lead to death. So will everybody remember that statistic? Because I think it's very, very important. And I told her, I said, I want to give this talk, which I do. It's one of my favorite talks that I give. But it also inspired me to create a lot of other workshops and content to actually put power in the hands of patients. Power in the form of information, power in the form of what to say and do specifically. And really, that was the inspiration behind the book, The Secret Language of Healthcare, How to Ask for the Care You Deserve. Because first of all, this language, this place is very unknowable, and it's not a place, people generally don't raise their hand saying, yeah, I want to be a patient. I mean, that's not something that we generally volunteer for, right? So we typically are faced with medical issues when we're not feeling well, when we are taking medication, when we're in crisis. That's a really, really crummy time to find out how to navigate healthcare effectively. I was giving one of these workshops, and I was, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a medical person, but I am a communications person. And I think that part of the disconnect is that we are constantly told that healthcare is complicated, and that makes you just really glaze over. How can we make healthcare simpler? How can we make the messages simpler? I was giving a workshop, and I was telling participants that I was going to give them some magic words about how to navigate healthcare. And every single person in the room looked at me expectantly. And in that moment, I thought, okay, we've got to get these words into the hands of ordinary people. And that was the moment that I decided that a book would be a really good way to do that, different way to do that. So in January, check my time here, in January of last year, I did a book writing workshop and got to work in earnest, talking with people that I knew that had experienced different medical situations. through WASHA, we have a whole host of resources and people. So in the book, I really highlight 20 either situations or diseases that could affect anyone. And it's broken down in 5 categories. The first category is it could happen to anyone. And the idea behind that is wake up, we need to get prepared. The second chapter is about partnering powerfully with the doctors, because if we don't do that, they're the experts. You know, you're the expert in you, but the doctors, they are necessary to helping us navigate healthcare. The third is being prepared for the hospital. And there are some very, very specific things. And hopefully these stories illustrate stories that will stick in your mind. So if, God forbid, you or a loved one ever have to be in the hospital, you won't forget. 4 is money matters, because the money part of healthcare is really unknown to us. Most people don't think about it until they have to. And if you don't think about it ahead of time, you can really get yourself into financial trouble. So understanding that and thinking about that ahead of time can really help someone navigate that. And 5, the 5th section is about advocates by our side. There's a whole host of people that are coming up in different professions. I'm going to talk about one today that are new, because this is a new movement. And so that's kind of the book in a nutshell. So I wondered if it would be okay to share with you 3 examples from the book, if we still have a little bit of time to do that. I start the book. This is the book. I start the book, the first chapter, with a really dramatic story, and I'm glad that nobody is eating at the moment, because so I've had one person describe it as a little disturbing, and it's put there for a reason. So when we had Allied Health Advocates, we had someone call us who wanted to hire an advocate. And he said that he wanted to hire an advocate because his wife had been in the hospital for a year in a coma, which is an unusual period of time, right? And he said that they wanted to pull all of her teeth. And the reason why that was so disturbing to him was that the day before whatever happened to her, that she went into the hospital, her teeth had been completely redone and they were in perfect order. And so he told me that when he asked about how this could happen, and basically her teeth were rotting, which is why they wanted to pull them. And he said, well, what happened when you went to brush her teeth? And they said that they had not brushed her teeth in a year. Mm-hmm. So dramatic story, very disturbing, something that I could never forget. I think that you probably will never forget that story. So fast forward to a few years after that, and a good friend of mine, Deborah Wakefield, her husband, Reed, was at late stage prostate cancer, and she asked me to visit him. I didn't know Reed very well. Gentle guy, over 6 feet, Boeing engineer, just awesome guy. And he was in the hospital, really weak. And this was going to be a big day for him because they were going to have a lawyer come into the hospital. He'd been in the hospital for 4 days, and he was pretty weak and could barely talk. But he said that he wanted to get cleaned up. He wanted a shower. He hadn't had one in 4 days. And he wanted a shave. That was really important for him to feel good for his meeting. And I asked him if he had had his teeth brushed. And he looked at me and he shook his head. And I said, okay, well, would you like your teeth brushed? And he, said that. And I asked the nurse if he could have his teeth brushed, and she did that. And that was amazing. It wasn't a big deal, but you had to know to ask. And so part of the point of this book is you have to know to ask. The things that we assume are happening in healthcare might be happening, but sometimes they're not. And to think about them is very, very important. So that was the first chapter of that book, and I give some very specific language. to use. So when I was giving one of these talks about the book, somebody raised their hand and said, "Are there any happy stories in your book?" You know, because there are a lot of stories that are pretty intense. And I would say that one of the things that I learned, this is midway through the book, that is definitely a magic couple words, are care conference. I don't know if anybody has heard that term before, but it's a very common term used in skilled nursing facilities to help people who are working with patients get on the same page about the care and progress that a patient makes. So typically, occupational therapy, speech therapy, the doctors, the people overseeing the medication, pharmacists would all get together and look at the progress of a patient to make sure that they are progressing. So either they could say, yes, you can stay and you're progressing, or no, you need to be going somewhere else. So the reason why this is such a magic word, who knew, is that actually you can ask for a care conference not in a skilled nursing facility. When you're in a hospital, you can ask the social worker to ask for a care conference. And one story that I just remember in working with Beth was this gentleman who was not in the hospital, in a lot of pain, younger guy with Parkinson's, and also he had inflammatory arthritis. And so he had a couple things going on, and he was over 6 feet tall, but very, very hunched over when he called us and said, "I'm in tremendous amount of pain. My neurologist who's overseeing my Parkinson's won't coordinate with my rheumatologist who's overseeing my joints. I desperately need a specific kind of surgery, and my neurologist won't approve it. I don't know what to do." And Beth, the advocate, got in there, and it just so happened that she accompanied him to his appointment and found out that the neurologist was on one floor different than the rheumatologist, and said, "Hey, can we all just have a care conference together?" And at that care conference, the doctors talked, the patient talked, and he said, whatever the risks were, he wanted to have the surgery. And so it was that three-way conversation that really allowed him to have the surgery. And Beth went to see him after he was recovering, and this guy who she didn't know he was that tall at the time because he was so hunched over in pain. But she said he came out of the bathroom and he was just this tall, amazing guy who got the care that he deserved. Last story before we go, want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask questions, is the last chapter of the book is about something called a death doula. Has anybody ever heard that term? Death doula? So just like there are birth doulas that are kind of newish on the scene, but have increased in popularity because they've really decreased cost and increased the comfort provided to somebody giving birth, death doulas are a new type of advocate that are being used at the end of life. And they're being used for the non-medical aspects of dying in a really amazing way. And we actually have some amazing death doulas here in the Seattle area. So I won't go into all of the details of that. I want to give an opportunity for you to ask questions, but I will say that in all of this, just 3 quick takeaways that I've learned in this journey looking at people navigating healthcare is, number 1, make sure to take someone with you if you are ever going to the hospital. That is number 1. If you don't remember one other thing from today, make sure you do not go alone. 2 is know yourself, and that means understanding what your wishes might be. So you think about it, write it down. And 3 is share your wishes with someone else, so someone else actually knows what you want. Because without that, you may get care that you don't want. So anyway, those are 3 takeaways, and I would be happy to answer any questions, comments. Yes.
So I have a different view on one of your points that you made earlier. You said the doctor is your pet. I kind of don't agree with that based on a living experience. And I think you personally are your best health expert. And you know your body better than anybody else. And when you call your doctor or you email your doctor, you know, they're busy and they'll just blow you off. And I called mine, I had a little bit of blood in my urine one day. Next day, back dark. Third day, it was the color of Coca-Cola. And I called my doctor and he goes, oh, don't worry about it. Or just a little kidney infection going. And so, being who I am, I forced my way into his office politely and found out after that it was bladder cancer. And
Wow.
I have a foundation, I go to a Rotary conference every year, have a booth, met a lady whose mother had the same situation I did. Called the doctor, blood in the urine, he blew it off, don't worry about it, it's a kidney infection, it'll go away, it was dark, it'll go away. A few months later, it went away, it came back again, and she kept listening to her doctor.
Right.
And P.S., she died from advanced bladder cancer when she could have actually taken care of that. So you know your body better than anybody else. Don't let a doctor tell you over the phone or email. It's no big deal. When something goes wrong, because I have a poster in my booth at those conferences. You see red in your urine, go see SEE, your doctor. Don't call them, don't email them, go see them, and force your way into a specialist in whatever area that might be.
Right.
You have to take charge of it.
Absolutely, and that's really what health advocacy is all about, is knowing yourself and also finding experts who can help you. Not every doctor is going to be able to partner effectively with you. So.
Well, thank you, Robin, very much.
Can you stick around for a few minutes
Yes.
if people have
Oh,
questions? And she has
I have books.
books available.
If you would like to buy a book, I'm selling them for $20, which is the retail price. So be happy to do that and sign one for you to also give to a loved one. It's great gifts. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention. It was really great to be here today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robin. The books are in the back.
Yeah.
She'll stick around for questions. And I believe we have a drawing.
Yes, first of all, we have a speaker for next week. Back to Salt Mines. Vicki Davidson, she's with Big Table, and they're an organization that specifically helps restaurant workers who are in need. So the statistic in the United States is 1 in 6 restaurant worker lives below the poverty line. And so their specific focus is helping these people with the services they need to survive. So come see her next week. She'll be very good. Now we have a drawing. For those of you who don't know, every morning you can buy a raffle ticket when you come into this Rotary Club. Half the money goes back into the club, so we can do things like give scholarships and build water wells in Thailand and all sorts of good things. The other half goes into a progressively growing pot. If your number is drawn, you win 2 things. Number 1 is you win a book, which today is The Secret Language of Healthcare, signed copy. And you also win a chance to pull a card. There are 16 cards in this deck. If you draw the Joker, you win $1,055. Not too shabby. If you draw anything else, that card gets removed, the deck shrinks, and the pot grows. So, Robin, if you would pull a ticket, please. Thank you. So last 3. Okay, 819. Lucky winner. 819. Oh, no one's winning. 819.
I had the numbers, but they were the right combination.
All right. Thank you very much, Sherry. And we're right on time for adjourning the meeting. And so I will see everybody here next Tuesday. Meeting adjourned.
great week.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Glad you filmed.
Oh, yeah.